So I was on a panel at Computing a little bit ago, and the question that he asked at the end was, in one or two words, can you say what's the biggest sort of cause of cyber risk within your organization? And I went first, people, and everyone else on the panel went people. It was pretty clear-cut. Now, the reason for that is because, according to SANS, 95% of all incidents began with phishing. That's an awful lot of your incidents that could potentially be averted if people were less prone to phishing attacks. Phishing being one example of attacks against people. So, what's the consequences of this? I mean, a lot of you will know these numbers, but the FBI puts the figure at $2.3 billion in the last few years as a direct result of email-related security incidents. That's an awful lot of money. You've probably heard the saying, someone's always having a worse day than you when you're having a bad day. There was one person who accidentally transferred $100 million to a scammer. That's a bad day in the office. They were able to get $75 million of that back, so only $25 million lost that day. So, this is a real risk. It's very serious. It plays into a lot of other aspects of security. But we've been doing security and security awareness in a fairly serious way for a decade or so now. So why have we still got the same problems? The thing is, people, and I include myself in that, although it's been debated at times, like being helpful. Don't do it now, but if you have a moment at some point, go on YouTube, search for social engineering baby crying, and you'll get a perfect demonstration of how hard it is for people to resist this need to help, particularly when a sort of high-pressure situation is created. People are naturally curious. So if you combine this with the first point about being helpful, when someone finds a USB key on the road outside their office, they plug it in, see if they can get it back to the owner, and because they're nosy and they want to know what's on it. Now, I guess people are hopefully starting to get a bit savvy about this now with Mr. Robot and the awareness. So hopefully that's less of an issue than it was. As was mentioned earlier, people are also more impulsive and irrational than we like to think. And, everyone's driven to get the job done. So if there's some control or process that's making it difficult for them to do their job, perhaps Dropbox has been blocked by the network security team, well, let's try Google Drive then, because they're trying to get the job done. We're battling human nature and deeply ingrained habits. We need a different approach. And again, this is where you get a little bit of a sandwich effect from the first talk. Because businesses have figured out how to get people's attention. They figured out how to break and build habits. And they called it marketing. And I think that our security awareness functions can learn an awful lot from marketing approaches and taking a marketing-oriented approach to security awareness. So when we're thinking like a marketer, there's then well-understood metrics and analytics that can be brought to bear. We can think about things like calls to action and conversion rates. So when now you're on your news feed and you've got the little button to continue reading the article, so they can tell the difference between someone who browsed the article and actually read it versus someone who browsed the article and then went away again. We can use these same sorts of things to determine whether people are actually finishing reading an awareness notification or post. A/B testing. So this is where we try different types of messaging, and then we see whether one has a higher conversion rate, whether more people read through it when we use this headline versus that headline. Got the concept of inbound and outbound marketing. Interruptive marketing, where you do pop-ups, where you do interstitials, where you insert an advert into a video stream, and you make someone sit through it and watch it. And that's how most security awareness has traditionally been done. Posters, billboards, mail blasts. Inbound marketing is much more about building community, using social networks. and the like. And when you look at the various components of inbound marketing, you've got your search engine optimization, you've got social media and content. How can you insert security awareness into much more of the activity of the organization? So when management are doing their quarterly updates, can they bring in some references to content that's available and that sort of thing? So another really important concept from marketing, and this actually, again, plays with the sort of anthropology, looking at the cultural elements, is thinking in terms of roles. So you might have a simple threat model, and you might say, well, our catering staff, they need to have some security awareness, but we're not too worried. And we've got this sort of general awareness program which covers everyone for that sort of thing. But then we've got our system administrators. The system administrators, of course, will often hold the keys to the crown jewels, the data centers, the servers, and the bulk data. So you're going to want to tailor the messaging for these different audiences. Again, finance. The sorts of threats and attacks and risks associated with finance are very different from those associated with systems administrators. So expecting the same message to work with one and the other may be a mistake. We've then got developers. The guys building the code and the ladies building the code. Are they putting in, what are the controls around the source code? Where are the configuration files? Are the production passwords that are stored in repositories which are available on the network? Those sorts of things, which are, again, very different from those other elements. And also your executives. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard of whale fishing and CEO fraud. It's very different risks, very different approach you're going to want to take. And of course, you can take elements of each and combine them across the different sort of verticals within your program. But to expect one general awareness program to be effective and stick with everyone, I think is doomed to failure. Just going to briefly mention the 5 Ps, the marketing mix. It's just sort of high-level marketing aspects which I think can be applied. So in terms of the product, think about what is our product as a security function. What's the urgent need or pain that we're looking to address, and tailoring that to the specific audience. Place, how are we going to reach these people? So I mentioned earlier, injecting elements into updates and things that are happening anyway. Can we think of other creative ways to get in front of people? Promotion. People's attention is limited. There's a lot going on. There's a lot they're giving their attention to. They're trying to get the job done. So how are we going to get them to give attention to these things that we're interested in them looking at? And finally, price. You kind of think to yourself, well, we're offering a free service, free training, and so on. But the price is that they could be doing something else. They've got to give up time that they would otherwise be spending building product, building business, getting revenue. So there is a price, and that's the opportunity cost. And finally, profit or return on investment. I think we could probably get better, actually, at quantifying this in terms of, as a security function. But essentially, the reduction in your annualized loss expectancy, that is the amount you might expect to lose due to attacks, less the cost of the program, actually put a monetary figure on it to show that it's a good investment of resources. The thing is, though, if you do all of that, as has been mentioned, there will still be residual operational risk because people are human. And most systems are not designed with the humanity of humans in mind. The developers are looking at the happy path. If everyone does what they're meant to in the order they're meant to, then they achieve the end goal of the system. They're not thinking about all the ways that could go wrong along the way. What happens if that user's credentials have been stolen? So if we design systems with human fallibility in mind, we start to take a little bit of a different approach. Automation, remove the human element entirely. That's in the process of happening, and we'll see a lot of that in the next 5 or 10 years. It's a big factor. And factor authentication, so accepting that some people will have credentials stolen, introduce end-factor authentication, it's less likely that someone's going to be able to use those credentials maliciously. separation of duties, both people and systems. I think we've kind of all aware of this sort of idea of separation of duties of people, that you have different roles working together to achieve something such that there has to be a conspiracy or mass compromise to actually achieve a malicious ends. Well, you can do a similar thing with systems, whereby a system has a very specific role to play, and it's tightly controlled, that is all it can do, and therefore it becomes a smaller attack surface to protect. Throttling, monitoring and alerting. So most ticketing systems, customer support systems, whatever they might be, have a fairly standard framework for access control to records, which will essentially allow someone to pull up records as fast as they possibly can, which in a way is fine. If you're programming Happy Path, give them the files as quick as you can. But if you start to consider, well, perhaps that user's been compromised, there's malware running on their terminal, there's a remote access Trojan running, and someone's trying to pull these records out, you can then start thinking, well, perhaps we ought to have some throttling on that. Is a customer support person ever going to need more than, 5 records in a minute? Probably not. So how about setting a throttle for the amount of records that can be opened in a given amount of time? Then perhaps you also set a threshold. So if they've downloaded 20 records in 5 minutes, start sounding an alarm so someone can go and investigate. And finally, ABAC, attribute-based access control. Many of you will have heard of RBAC, role-based access control. ABAC is starting to gain traction, and that's looking at far more parameters about a user than simply what roles they've been allocated to. So you might look at whether the person actually works on this day of the week that they're trying to perform an action. You might look at some attributes of what they're trying to access. So in the customer call center, help desk sort of scenario, you might actually check with the phone system that the customer's record they're accessing is on the phone to them at the moment. Looking at that sort of state of the system gives you much more advanced capabilities in terms of making access control decisions and reduces the impact should something go wrong. So if we've got security awareness marketing and we've got fallibility aware systems, are we sorted? Well, you might have a message along these lines on your website. This is the one from the UK government's website. Don't give out private information, text messages and so on. Could be malicious, make sure they're genuine. So when I got this text message a couple of months ago, telling that my passport was going to be expiring soon and could I click on this link to go to a survey, what do you think I did? Well, I clicked on it because... but I did it very carefully. And interestingly, it's one of those things and you think, well, is it, isn't it? So I sent them an email and I said, is this a phishing, trick? Because the wording and everything else, it really looks quite convincing. And they wrote back and they said, yes, this is a scam. This is how you can report it to the phone people and so on. I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. Now, I'd clicked on that link and I'd seen the details of the survey and everything else, and I know, you know what, it was convincing, really, really convincing. The colour schemes were all right, the logos were right, the wording was right. Someone had done a properly good job on this phishing site. So I thought this was quite interesting. I wrote it up on LinkedIn. I don't have a huge audience on LinkedIn, but 400 people read that. Turns out, so did the Director General of the Passport Office, who got in touch to reassure me that this was a legitimate text message. Now, you see what I've done here, right? Because this is how we set our staff, our customers, our users of our systems up to fail all the time. Because we tell them one thing, and then we don't follow through and honour it ourselves in our systems and our processes. And that is setting people up to fail. If the message is, do not click on links in text messages and give up personal information, don't send them a text message asking them to do it. I'm going to finally sort of close with a mention, a shout out to the government, since I've just given them a downer. The CSG, which is the sort of security side of GCHQ, is producing some really good resources at the moment. I've thrown this one up because I think in terms of what we were talking about with awareness and the things that we're wanting to target and address, with a lot of these elements of common cyber attacks, you can work out which role that's going to relate to, and then you can use that to feed in to that sort of segmented awareness and training program to make sure that the right messages are getting to the right people about the right risks that are relevant to them. Historically, IT have always struggled with getting security on the radar, and for an awfully long time, the reason was because the vulnerabilities were there, but the threat wasn't. People weren't actually going after those vulnerabilities. Well, now they are, and that's why it's really gaining traction in terms of awareness at the moment. It's a good time, I think, to be in information security. There's still a lot of exciting challenges, but I don't sign up to the doom and gloom, we're all done for and owned. I think there's an awful lot we can do. There's an awful lot we can do in system design to make the designs more resilient and more human aware. There's an awful lot we can do in terms of awareness and training by getting more targeted messages to people. That's me. Just closing off. Design for humans, not robots. Invest in security awareness marketing, not security awareness. Consistency, no exceptions, and simple messages. Thank you.